You won't believe what happened when a Karen called the cops over my hay bales. Little did she know, I'm the county sheriff. I've always kept to myself, running my farm quietly, but when the new neighbor moved in, things took an unexpected turn. It started with a harmless argument over some hay bales I had placed in my yard, and before I knew it, I was in the middle of a full-blown confrontation. I didn't think much of it at first. After all, who would call the cops over a few bales of hay? But when the officers showed up and I recognized one of them as a friend, I knew something was off. The lady across the street was already on the phone, accusing me of blocking her driveway and causing a nuisance. But as soon as I introduced myself as the sheriff of the county, her face went pale. You could practically see the shock in her eyes. Now, I wasn't about to back down, but what followed was a series of events that left me questioning how far some people will go just to get their way. The story gets even crazier from here, and I promise you won't believe what happened next. Stick around, and I'll tell you how it all unfolded. At first, I thought it was just a misunderstanding. I've been living on this property for years, and the hay bales were nothing out of the ordinary. Every fall, I stack them up for feeding the animals, and they've always been placed in the same spot. But apparently, the new neighbor wasn't a fan of my rural lifestyle, as she put it. She moved in a few months ago, and I hadn't really had a chance to get to know her. But after that call to the cops, it was clear she had no intentions of getting along with anyone in the neighborhood. She'd already made complaints about my animals making noise, my fence not being pretty enough, and even the smell of fresh cut hay. It seemed like she was looking for a reason to pick a fight. I didn't mind the complaints much. After all, it's a quiet country area. But when she decided to escalate things by involving the cops, I realized this wasn't going to be easy. As I stood there talking to the officers, I could feel the tension building. They were polite, but I could tell they were getting the full story from her side. They were also confused. Why would a sheriff be caught up in such a petty issue? What did she expect to happen? But that's when things started to get strange. One of the officers said something that made me pause. We've had complaints from other people in the neighborhood. When the officer mentioned the complaints, my heart skipped a beat. I knew the area had its fair share of quirky neighbors, but I had never heard anything like this before. The officer wasn't being rude or accusatory, but I could tell he was caught between duty and confusion. I glanced over at the woman standing on her front porch, arms crossed, watching the interaction unfold like she was the judge and jury. There was a smug look on her face, almost like she was enjoying the chaos she had caused. I tried to stay calm and explained that my hay bales weren't in anyone's way, and that I'd always stacked them there, long before she ever moved in. But the more I spoke, the more it felt like I was getting nowhere. It was like she had painted this perfect picture of me as the villain, and no matter what I said, I was already guilty in her eyes. The officer seemed unsure of what to do next. He couldn't exactly arrest me for stacking hay on my own property, but the situation was definitely starting to feel like it could escalate. As I stood there, I thought about all the other little things that had been happening lately. The odd looks from her when we passed each other on the street, a complaining about the noise from my barn at all hours. But this felt different. She was trying to push me into a corner, and I could feel it. The real kicker came when another neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, came outside. She was an older lady who had lived on this block for years and had always been friendly to me. She walked up to the officer and spoke in a low voice, but I could hear every word. This isn't the first time she's caused trouble. She's been trying to get people in this neighborhood to complain about you for weeks. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My jaw nearly hit the ground. Mrs. Jenkins had always been a quiet observer, so hearing her speak up like this made me realize just how far the new neighbor had gone to turn everyone against me. But that wasn't all. Mrs. Jenkins went on, "Last week, she asked me to make a noise complaint against you for your horses. I told her I hadn't heard anything unusual, but she wouldn't take no for an answer. And she's been talking to the Smiths down the street too. They've got it out for you now too." I stood there stunned. It was becoming clear that this wasn't just about hay bales or noise complaints anymore. She was on a mission to stir up trouble, and I was at the center of it. But why? What was her game here? The officer looked between Mrs. Jenkins and the woman across the street, his brow furrowing. It felt like the tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. The officer seemed to be weighing his options, and the awkward silence was only broken by the occasional creak of the fence in the wind. Before anyone could say anything more, the new neighbor finally spoke up. Her voice was calm, but there was something off about the way she said it. "I'm just trying to live in peace. I don't want anyone else in this neighborhood to feel unsafe because of, well, whatever this is. It's the hay, the horses, the noise. You're not being considerate of others." But the way she said safe felt manipulative. It was as if she was trying to paint me as some kind of threat. It dawned on me that she wasn't just complaining about minor inconveniences, she was laying the groundwork for something bigger. I looked at the officer, trying to gauge his reaction, but he just nodded and stepped back a little, probably unsure of how deep this drama ran. That's when I made the decision. I wasn't going to let her make me the bad guy. I needed answers. This was no longer just about a few hay bales. It was personal now. As the conversation dragged on, I made a mental note to find out more about this woman, to dig deeper into what she had been saying behind closed doors. What was she really after? And how far was she willing to go to ruin my reputation? But even as I prepared to fight back, I knew I was walking into something much bigger than I realized. It was just the beginning, and the storm that was brewing hadn't even reached its peak yet. As the days went by, things only escalated. I kept to my routine, but the tension in the neighborhood was palpable. Every time I went out, I could feel her eyes on me from across the street. It was like she was waiting for me to slip up, to give her something to use against me. And honestly, it felt like she was planting little seeds of doubt in everyone's mind. One by one, I started hearing whispers from my neighbors, complaints about the horses, the noise, the way I stacked my hay. It was as if she had a network of people working for her. I could see her talking to Mrs. Jenkins more often, her voice always low, her hand on the older woman's arm like they were in on something. I wasn't sure if Mrs. Jenkins was being manipulated or just keeping the peace, but every time she looked my way, I could see a flicker of hesitation in her eyes. The worst part, people were starting to believe her. They hadn't come right out and said it, but I could tell. They'd nod and smile when they saw me, but their faces always seemed a little too stiff. That was when I knew it wasn't just about the hay bales anymore. It was about something much deeper. Then came the phone call. It was around dusk, and I was in the barn, finishing up some chores when my phone buzzed. The officer who had been at my house the other day was on the line. His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. "Sheriff," he started, "I need you to come by the station. We've got a situation with a new neighbor, and you're going to want to hear this." My stomach sank. Something was off. It wasn't just about noise complaints or hay bales anymore. I had a sinking feeling that this had all been leading up to something bigger, and I was about to find out what. When I arrived at the station, the officer was waiting for me. He motioned for me to follow him into an office, and as soon as the door shut behind us, he turned to me with a serious expression. "We've been getting reports about you for weeks now. People saying you're intimidating, causing disturbances." Intimidating? I interrupted, incredulous. "For stacking hay." He gave a tight-lipped smile, clearly trying to avoid getting caught up in the politics of it all. "Look, Sheriff, we both know that there's been more going on than just that. The complaints are coming from several different people now. It's not just the woman across the street, it's the Smiths, the Millers, and a few others." His voice dropped lower, like he was about to say something that might make things worse. "Some of them are starting to make more serious allegations." My heart started to race. What in the world were they saying about me? "They've been saying you've been threatening them, getting too close to their property, making them feel unsafe." I froze, disbelief creeping into my veins. "That's a lie. I haven't threatened anyone." "I know," he said quickly, sensing my frustration. "But these reports are stacking up, and the longer this goes on, the harder it's going to be to ignore. People are starting to talk about filing a formal complaint. There's talk of taking this to the county board, maybe even getting a restraining order." My mind was racing. Was this really happening? How had things spiraled this far? "What do you want me to do?" I asked, the words almost feeling foreign as they left my mouth. I never imagined I'd be sitting here, in my own sheriff's office, being accused of something like this. The officer leaned forward, his voice almost a whisper now. "I'm asking you to be careful, Sheriff. These people, especially the new neighbor, they're not just playing with petty complaints anymore. They're playing a dangerous game. If this keeps up, we might not be able to keep it from turning into something bigger." I nodded, processing his words, but in the back of my mind, I was already plotting my next move. I couldn't let her get away with this, not when she was turning the whole neighborhood against me. I'd been patient, but now it was time to fight back. I wasn't just going to sit here and let her destroy my reputation. I spent the next few days digging into her past, talking to people who knew her before she moved here. What I uncovered wasn't pretty. There were whispers of trouble at her previous homes, land disputes, odd complaints about neighborly issues, and even some talk about her trying to get landowners to sell under questionable circumstances. The pieces were starting to come together, but there was still one key piece of the puzzle I was missing. Then I got the call, the one that would change everything. It was late at night when the phone rang. My heart skipped a beat as I picked it up. The voice on the other end was shaky, but clear. "Sheriff, you need to get over here now. There's something you have to see." Before I could respond, the line went dead. My mind raced. What had happened? Was this her next move? Or had it gone too far this time? I grabbed my keys, and without a second thought, I rushed out the door. The tension in the air was thick. Whatever was waiting for me on the other side of town, I knew it was going to be the final straw, and this time I wasn't sure what was going to happen next. I sped through the darkened streets, my headlights cutting through the thick, foggy air. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as my mind raced, piecing together everything that had happened. The tension in the air was suffocating. I was on the verge of uncovering something big about the new neighbor, but now, with this mysterious phone call, I could feel the weight of the situation shifting again. As I approached the end of the road, where her house stood in the distance, something felt off. The place was eerily quiet, too quiet. I slowed my truck, trying to make out any movement through the trees and the overgrown grass. My gut was telling me to be cautious, but I had come this far. I couldn't turn back now. I parked a few yards away from her house and stepped out, the night air biting at my skin. Every step felt heavy as I walked toward her property. The phone call still echoed in my mind. "You need to get over here now," the voice had said. But who had called? It hadn't sounded like anyone I knew. Could it have been her, trying to pull me into another trap? I reached her front gate and stopped. That's when I saw it. Her front door was wide open. No lights, no sound. It was as if the house had been abandoned in a hurry. I hesitated for a moment, then decided to make my move. I pushed the gate open and crept toward the door. As I got closer, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. This didn't feel like a simple neighborly dispute anymore. Something was seriously wrong. I stepped inside, calling out, "Hello, anyone there?" My voice echoed through the empty halls, but there was no response. The silence was oppressive, but then I heard a noise, a faint thud from upstairs. My heart raced. I started up the stairs cautiously, each step creaking beneath me. It was then that I noticed something strange. The furniture in the hallway was overturned, and there were scattered papers and broken picture frames along the floor. It looked like the house had been ransacked. My mind whirled. Had she left in a hurry, or had someone else been here?